The cheapest track was on, but is it worth it? What's up, Warriors? I'm JR. Welcome back to Warrior House DIY, and in this video, we're going to review and show you how to set up your Wen track saw. I left a link to Amazon in the description below. Hang around, I'll give you my professional woodworker's opinion, and stick around at the end of the video, I'll leave you my list of pros and cons for the Wen track saw. Warrior House DIY, empowering you with skills for life. Make sure to like this video, check out our helpful links in the description below, and don't forget to subscribe. We get asked all the time, do you recommend table or track saws? And quite honestly, I say both. I recommend track saws for people just getting into woodworking and for professionals looking to save their back a little bit. As a professional cabinet maker, I have primarily used Festool, but there are two main reasons why we chose to buy this Wen track saw and review it. One, the most obvious, is its affordability. But number two is its versatility. It's using the same track as Festool, most popular brand of choice among professional woodworkers. And so with that versatility, you're going to be able to interchange some of the adapters and some of the rail parts and components that you could use with Festool as well. One of the things you're going to notice when you set up this track saw on the track is that there's this little piece of rubber, black plastic, kind of hanging off the edge here. That is an extremely important piece, right? Because that's going to be what you use to set up all of your measurements for your cuts. But right out of the box, this rubber, this black plastic, is sticking out a little further than it needs to be, a little further than the blade. So I'm going to bring this up for a close-up. I also recommend one of these hoses that are mar resistant, meaning they're not going to scrape up the edge of your plywood as you drag the hose across it, keeping it out of your way, obviously for safety purposes. But let's go over a couple different things here. On the back side of the saw is a depth set. You can unscrew this and you can slide it up and down in this track. What I did was I set this specifically for 3/4 inch plywood. So as you can see, when you activate your plunge release, and you can drop your blade down. Now that is set for 3/4 inch plywood. That's what we're going to show you how we're going to cut today using this. So after you've set that up, you want to actually make sure that your gauge is where it needs to be. Maybe you are cutting 45-degree bevels, but in this case, we're going to be cutting it at 0, top dead center. So we don't want any bevel on that, so we've locked ourselves in on that. Another thing I'm going to point out, right here, if you just bought this saw and you're watching this video for the first time, you're going to notice that you have a little orange piece here and I don't. I took that out on purpose. Why did I do that? Well, simply put, I'm not using this saw just for straight plunge through cuts. Sometimes I'm going back and forth, and that piece right there is your back kick preventer. It's a safety feature, so I don't recommend taking it off, but if you know what you're doing and you know why you're taking it off, then go ahead and do what you've got to do. In my case, I'm not using it, so don't be concerned when you see it on your saw and you wonder what that is. Now let's get back into the track here. We want to make sure that our black plastic edge right here, which is what we're going to use to set up all of our measurements for every cut from here on out until this thing gets so chipped up that it needs to be replaced, which it is replaceable. Talk about the anatomy of a track for a couple seconds here. You can see that black plastic on the bottom. It's just peel and stick. It's the same thing with these foam anti-slip mats that are on the bottom of the track. Just like Festool, except that Wen has made their own track. That is an anti-slip padding on the bottom so that you can lay it down on top of a sheet of plywood and you can see it's not moving anywhere, right? For those who are feeling a little bit more insecure about that, there are clamps available that would slide in on both ends of this track and it would clamp it down to the sheet that you're working on. Now, there's a connector in the middle here. What I like about the Wen brand saw is that it actually comes with the saw with 2 tracks that are 50 inches each. So you're going to span 100 inches with 2 tracks put together, which means you're outside of that typical 96 inches 4x8 sheet of plywood. You'll be able to make one through cut without having to move your track and follow the pencil line. One thing I will advise is that when you're connecting these 2 tracks, they do line up pretty straight, but over time you might bang them around a little bit, is that you can get a long straight edge when you're assembling them and hold that straight edge in place while you're tightening down these unions that are on the front and back side of the track. Now let's get back to cutting a clean edge on this plastic cut guide. One thing I'm going to advise is if you are using a setup similar to mine, you've got some kind of sawhorse setup with the purple or pink foam insulation board underneath, and then you've got a sheet of plywood on top of that, is that you're going to want to make that first cut on the pink foam, not your good sheet of plywood. Remember, we cut twice and measure once. Oh wait, no. Measure twice and cut once. We don't want to screw up that plywood. So let's move this sheet of plywood out of the way. Let's get this cut and we can get back to the rest of the setup. So we're down to our Pink Panther insulation board, available at pretty much all hardware stores, and this is your sacrificial sheet. Just like a commercial CNC machine or computer navigated cutting machine is going to have a sacrificial sheet of typically MDF board or some other kind of plywood underneath it for the bit to go through, cut around, swirl around. That sheet will get replaced over and over again. This sheet will last you a tremendous amount of time. I'm using 1.5 inch, and I'm using that for stability reasons, but with that you're going to get cuts on one side for a really long time, and then you can flip it over and then use the other clean side after you finally have cut through that. But guys, I'm telling you, this board is going to help your dust collection tremendously. I will say that if you have the hose connected to the vacuum, which you don't need to do to operate this hose, I recommend it for health reasons. You're going to be able to extract a lot more dust through this saw, through the vacuum channels that are on here when you've got this board underneath it. There are some people that are gonna go ahead and just cut the plywood with nothing sacrificial underneath it. They're gonna set it right at that depth, and hey, if you want to do that, go for it. It's not the right way to do it. You want to have that sacrificial piece underneath it. So let's get into this. What we're gonna do right now, because I have my backstop removed on this saw, I can move forward and backwards. I'm gonna set this up so that I can take off all of this black plastic here right up to the blade. Now that's creating what's called zero clearance. Now my blade is going to ride right against that black plastic, and I know every time I set up a measurement, I'm putting the black plastic edge right on it. Now I don't like that it's black. It makes it a little bit harder to see your pencil lines, but it is what it is. You could probably replace it with a white one or a clear one if you chose to do so. But let's make this cut, and then I'll show you on the plywood how we line up some cuts. That's how you make your cut to get your zero clearance guide set up. Now let's get back onto the plywood, and we'll show you how to make those measurements now. Now when it comes to making these cuts, we're going to want to start towards the back end of this track here. So we're going to drop the saw onto the track. You're actually starting a little bit off the back end of this plywood, right? Because we want to plunge down as we get all the way down 3/4 of an inch through that plywood and then ride this thing all the way through to the very end. That's the one difference I will say between this and maybe a different company like Festool, is that their track's a little bit longer. It's about 120 inches, or if you put the 255s together, you're 110 inches. You got a little bit extra play to hang off, so you're not worried about this. What I have noticed with Wen's saw though is that this track has a very tight clearance, allowing it to actually make a cut starting at about the halfway point. What am I talking about the halfway point? Let's flip this guy over for a little bit here. I'm talking about when the saw is almost halfway. You can see the difference here between the silver and the black. When the saw is almost halfway off the track for starting that first cut. Now you know you're at the center of your blade at that point. That's going to be the deepest point. That's going to allow you to make that cut all the way through. Now, what's preventing us from going all the way through into the purple foam board? Again, that's going to be this depth set that we talked about earlier on in this video. For me, in my case, I have this set for 3/4 inch deep plywood. There's a little flip right here on the back side of that if I flip that up just like that, that actually sets me up for about a 1/2 inch thick plywood, because the depth's going to come down to it and it's going to stop right there, as opposed to, see how shallow that is? As opposed to dropping that back down and coming all the way back down. Kind of hard to see the difference on the camera. You'll get the feel for this when you're working with your own saw. But right now, I'm set up for 3/4 of an inch. There's different settings on top of the saw here as far as being able to plunge cut freely, which is, you've got your plunge release. That's a trigger at the top there. And then you've got your main trigger for squeezing for power right here. So in this case, I'm set up for free plunging. You can also have it set for a locking mechanism so that you can change the blade. That's done by accessing this Allen bolt right here. We'll go over that in just a little bit. We're going to show you some cuts first. as you can see, we've got a very beautifully clean cut piece of plywood. That foam underneath is not just your sacrificial sheet for dust collection reasons, but it's more so your sacrificial sheet so that you have no tear out on the back edge of this plywood. It's perfectly cut. There's no sanding required when it comes to sheet goods like this. Very minimal sawdust on the table. It wasn't throwing dust all over the room. So the track saw and the vacuum has done its job. I'm gonna go ahead and run through the rest of these here, and then I'm gonna show you guys how to change the blade. All right, so we're gonna talk about how we change the blade on this track saw. Maybe you've cut through a whole bunch of sheet goods and you're far beyond DIY experience at this point and you're actually using this thing and you started your own custom cabinetry business. That's great. Or maybe you hacked into something you probably weren't supposed to hack through and you chewed up your blade. Well, it's a really simple procedure. We're gonna start with one most important thing, which is to make sure we are not powered up. So we're gonna go ahead and check the plug on our saw, make sure that we've turned this plug off. In fact, we are disconnected. In this case, we were plugged in, so now we're not. There's no power. We'll double check it at the switch over here. You guys will see as we push our release switch in here and pull our trigger, nothing is happening, right? When it comes to changing the blade on this Wen track saw, you're gonna wanna focus on a couple specific areas. First and foremost is gonna be this orange lever right here on top. It's not too far off of your trigger finger if you're holding the saw as if you're about to use it. Now, what does this do? There's 3 different settings on here. And as you can see, the one that it's set on most commonly is going to be the circle with a line through it. And that is your free plunge mode. That allows you to plunge as we click our release there, and we can plunge down to, in my case, my depth set, which is set for 3/4 of an inch, right? This bottom setting, if we go all the way down, which has got a circle with the line on the side of it, is actually gonna just take us down to a little bit of a score cut, so to speak. It's gonna cut through nothing more than maybe a 1/4 inch plywood. The one that we're gonna focus on right now is the very top. So I'm gonna go back to the center, which is our circle with the line through it. That's your free plunge mode. And then this mode, which has a circle with an arrow pointing down. You'll notice that when I hit the release and I push down on this and I let go, the blade is stopped perfectly at the arbor through the hole, through the access panel right there, so that you can change the blade on this. So then the next area of importance is going to be the Allen wrench that's tucked into the power cord there. It's very convenient. I don't recommend that you lose that. So we're gonna go ahead and change this blade out. I'll get you guys in a little bit more of a close-up. So the first thing that we've done is locked our blade into position, and now we're actually able to go and get this Allen wrench in here. But wait, the blade's just spinning. Well, that's that other area of importance that I wanted to mention to you guys, which is right there. Right next to your trigger is an orange and black lever. You push that down, and what it does is it locks the blade as you're pushing it. You need to hold it, so lefty loosey, righty tighty. And as you're holding that down, you can break free the Allen bolt on the arbor that holds the blade in place. Once you're there in your free spinning, you can do this by hand. You don't need to use the Allen wrench. You can see that I'm just using my hand to do that. So you're gonna wanna unscrew the bolt, set that aside, very important. Then you're gonna have the washer that goes on right after the bolt. Now the blade. For the blade, you're just gonna simply, you can see the arbor is right there. You're gonna lift out and pull it straight down through the bottom of here. Now we're gonna use this blade and put this one right back on. The blade that comes with the Wen track saw is fine for cutting most materials. It's, I believe it's a 24 tooth. I had this upgraded to a 42 tooth. I wanted to try it out and see how they compare to some of the more professional brands that are out there. And like I said, so far so good when it comes to cutting through our sheet goods. But let's go ahead and get this blade back in. You can see that we slide it back up through the bottom of the saw, put it right there so it's on the arbor. There's a circle ring. That blade's gonna sit right on there. Then we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna put our washer on there. It only goes in one direction. It's not a perfect circle, right? It's square I'll hold that up for a better view. You guys can see it. It's square on 2 edges and round on the other 2 edges. So we're gonna get that fitting in right there, the way it goes, and we'll get our bolt in there. Once our bolt is in, don't wanna cross thread that. You wanna make sure that it's going in easily by hand. You've got that all the way in, snugged up as best as you could. That's when you can go ahead, hit that lever to stop the blade from free spinning and get your Allen wrench on there to tighten that guy down into place. There you have it. Then we're gonna be able to use our trigger release to release the blade from that position. Now don't forget to put it back into the free plunge mode when you're gonna go back and make your cuts. If you've got a depth set like I do for 3/4 of an inch, then you're already set and you're ready to go. I'm excited for you to get started with your Wen track saw. Again, you can grab one at the link in the description below this video, but as promised, here are my list of pros and cons. I really don't have a whole lot of negative things to say about this saw. Highly recommend the Wen track saw for beginning woodworkers or even contractors and cabinet makers who are on a budget. But let's start with the cons and get those out of the way. Number one is gonna be dust collection, and it's only because I feel they could have done a better job with this. Maybe I'm spoiled because I've worked with Festool for so long, but as you can see here, this is the pile of sawdust that was swept up from cutting through about 20 sheets of plywood. And it's not that much, but if you were cutting indoors, this might be concerning for you. It is going to significantly reduce your sawdust though if you're hooked up to the vacuum compared to just running a circular saw with no protection and no track. Number two would be bevel cuts. If you're cutting anything other than a top dead center 0-degree cut with this Wen track saw, you might feel a little instability. It was a little bit more wobble than what I was expecting, but if you're confident in your abilities and you let the tool do the work, I'm confident that you can make 45-degree bevel cuts with this saw all day long. And that would lead me actually to the third con, which is power. It's not necessarily a big negative. You are getting what you pay for when it comes to this saw. Again, let the tool do the work. If you're hogging through a heavy 6/4 board of hickory, it's gonna take a while with this saw to get through it compared to some of the higher end, more expensive professional saws that are available on the market. But that's really all I can say as far as the negatives to this saw. It's a fantastic saw overall, which brings me to my list of pros. Number one is gonna be cost and affordability. For a little less than $200, you are getting this track saw and 2 50-inch tracks with the joining couplers to make a 100-inch track saw readily available out of the box. Compared to some of the higher end brands like Festool and Makita, those are going to be upsells. You're going to get the saw separately. Now, that also brings me back to versatility. A big draw for this saw is that if you are starting off with the Wen track saw and you decide to start branching into Festool with maybe, say, their router, you don't need to go and buy a new track. You're already set up and ready to rock and roll on that. Also with track clamps and other accessories. And number three is going to be ease of use. This saw is extremely easy to use, and for beginning woodworkers that don't want to go out and spend $400 or $500 on a table saw, maybe you have limited workspace, so you're looking for a fold-up table saw, and those are going to run you a little bit more money. This saw stores away with very little space. There's a bag available for the 2 tracks to break down into about a 50-inch carrying bag, which is great if you're going from job site to job site, but if you're in your garage, you can simply slip those up onto a shelf, no big deal, and this will fit right back into the box that it came from. If you bought the extra dust collector hose, which I highly recommend, we'll also leave a link down below for all the accessories that we showed you in this video, you can roll that thing right up and stick it right in the box. Guys, the Wen track saw is a fantastic option for those who are getting into woodworking. It's a fantastic option for those who are looking to save a little bit of money on their tools, and it will get the job done. I can guarantee it. I am running this saw through its paces on multiple jobs as we speak, and I have not run into any issues. The blades, I'm using the Wen brand blades just to go full review here when it comes to Amazon, and they're really not doing that bad of a job. For something that's about 20 bucks or 30 bucks compared to an $80 or $150 blade that you could get for one of your Festool saws, guys, you just can't beat it when it comes to it. Again, JR with Warrior House DIY. I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to share it with anybody else looking for track saw reviews, but more importantly, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.